Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today I'm going to be doing my July and August wrap-up. I'm combining my two wrap-ups. This one might be a little bit longer because I tend to blather. I read 9-10 books in July and August, which wasn't what I was going for. I really wanted to read more because the summer I have more time. Also, I would like to apologize for the lighting. Today is literally the only day I can film all week. So the first book I read in July was Hollow City by Ransom Riggs. This is the sequel to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and it took me a while to get through this. And the apathy for this series, I don't really care for it. I don't care for the characters that much. I put this as a part of my summer TBR challenge series because I've been meaning to finish this trilogy for a while. I like this one enough that I am going to finish the series. It's just not to my taste, so I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Perfectly average rating. Yeah, I just don't have too many thoughts on this one. The next book I read was Persuasion by Jane Austen. Persuasion is about a girl named Anne Elliot who at 19 fell in love with a man and he proposed to her, and while she really wanted to accept him, her family convinced her not to because he didn't have any connections, he didn't have any money, so they convinced her to turn him away. And then like 9 years later he comes back into the picture with all the money that you could want, status, and he's now a respected member of society. And so Anne is kind of wrestling with, does she still have feelings for him? Could he possibly still have feelings for her after she rejected him? I can say going into this, I was nervous that I maybe wouldn't like it at all because I love Pride and Prejudice. It's one of my favorite books, but I haven't read anything else by Jane Austen. I fell in love with Anne. She's just such a sweet, mature character. In Pride and Prejudice, all the girls are a lot younger, but she's mature and reserved and just very caring to her ridiculous family. I thought the romance developed a little late in the story. I wish it would have happened a little earlier. Jane Austen is a very descriptive writer. Like, I wish there was more dialogue in it. It's very, very descriptive. In the foreword of this book, it actually says that you don't hear Anne Elliot speak until like past chapter 3, just to give you an example of how descriptive Jane Austen can be. It's still very witty and satirical, and it makes fun of how ridiculous certain families and society were at the time, which I loved. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm now very excited to read the rest of Jane Austen's work. So I know I was complaining about the lighting before, but Past Isabella had a really difficult time summing up one of my favorite books this year, and I hated the way it came out, so I just decided I'm gonna insert this clip. Please excuse the terrible, terrible lighting. It's like 10:30 p.m. My hair is a mess and I feel kind of shiny, but it's been a very long day. Very good day. I actually went to a book signing. I met Angie Thomas, Becky Albertalli, and Julie Murphy, which was super great. Maybe I'll insert a photo or two. That was really super fun, but I am very tired, and I'm just gonna quickly say a few thoughts I had on Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. When I decided to pick this book up, it was like in the middle of the booktube hype, and I'm gonna be one of the people contributing to the hype. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it so very much. Basically, Eliza and Her Monsters follows 17-year-old Eliza, who is an online webcomic creator, and this comic becomes crazy popular. She gets a huge fandom, but Eliza herself actually keeps her identity anonymous. She's kind of alone, and then a new boy comes to school, and he turns out to be the most popular fan fiction writer of Monster C, and things kind of take off from there. I love this book from start to finish. I was totally enthralled. Just like Fangirl, you get little bits and pieces of the story, but in this case you actually get the pictures in the comics, and I just thought it enriched the story in a way that Fangirl, it just didn't pay off for me in Fangirl. I thought Fangirl was kind of a blatant parody ripoff of Harry Potter, but I found Eliza and Her Monsters to be a story about the fandom and all the things that encompass that, the good and the bad, and not so much to be focused on the little things that are happening to our characters, because if you just read those parts, you don't quite understand really what's going on, but you understand how much Eliza has a passion for this and how much she loves her work. I think Sam from Thoughts on Tome said it best. She said this book is a love letter to fandoms, and if you are a part of any fandom, Harry Potter, Star Wars, any of the book fandoms we talk about, I highly, highly recommend this book. I thought it was miles above fangirl. I could keep talking about it, but really I want to keep this clip very short. And needless to say, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and back to the regular, better lighted video. The next book I read was totally on brand for me, and it was The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Audier. I inhale read this book. I read it as a part of the Booktubeathon. This book, again, is a pretty popular book on BookTube. It is a retelling of 1001 Nights. It follows our main character Shahrazad, who decides she's going to get revenge on the king, or I should say, excuse me, caliph, because he has killed her friend. I love this book for one reason and one reason only, and that was because of its angst. I love angsty relationships, especially in fantasy. It's just something I've always enjoyed, and this book takes angst to the next level. As much as I loved their angsty back and forth, I think it developed a little quickly. Like, Shahrazad's changing perspective happened a little quickly, in my opinion. Could not give this book a full 5 stars purely because of the lack of world building. I don't understand how this world works. I don't understand the kingdoms, how things are ruled. I would love for this world to be expanded upon, because what little we got of it, I was thoroughly enjoying. I also wasn't the biggest fan of the fact that there's kind of a love triangle that is maybe somewhat introduced, and that wasn't necessary. All of my complaints aside, I did like the characters. The storyline was interesting, and the reveals, although it could be a little predictable, I still really enjoyed, and overall I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This next book I also read for the Booktubeathon, and it was Juniper Lemon's Happiness Index by Julie Israel. This one was the Booktubeathon pick, and I decided to pick it up just because everyone was giving Ariel a really hard time about having like a sponsored pick with the Booktubeathon. You didn't have to read it. It was barely mentioned, and if the hosts wanted to get a copy and read it, they could. And I got irritated with that whole situation, so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna pick it up. It follows our main character, Juniper Lemon, who is grieving her sister's death, and the way she's kind of not getting through it, but the way she's working through her grief is that she writes down all the good things and the bad things that happened to her down on these little index cards, and then one day the card goes missing. Felt that this book was a little lackluster. It felt kind of generic in some aspects, especially the romance. Did not care for it at all. The one thing I really, really enjoyed about this book is what it did with grief. It was very raw and seemed very authentic. If intense grief is something that bothers you, I would stay away from this, because it's not shy about how dark it can be. And if that's something you're just not ready to read, I will advise against this book. I also like the friend dynamic. The friends that Juniper starts to get and how they work, and it seemed like an actual high school friend group that you get. It's not something where an adult writer tries to make the kids sound like hip and cool and all that kind of stuff. I gave Juniper Lemon 3 out of 5 stars. This next book was a real head scratcher. I read The Selection by Kira Cass. This also I put on my summer TBR list because I've had it for a long time, and I knew it was going to be a book that I could breeze right through, and boy did I do that. This one, we all know about dystopian bachelor, little lacking with the dystopian elements. Before I start my list of complaints, because trust me, there are many, I enjoyed myself while reading this book. I didn't expect to like it. I was secretly hoping it was going to be a guilty pleasure read, and I think I found my newest guilty pleasure series. I didn't hate America as much as I expected to. I thought she was going to be super whiny and annoying. However, I foresee that she will be very annoying in the future. Shockingly, I liked the love interest. But then I have many complaints and many things that just made me confused. I thought the caste system that they have, like 1s, you're the best, 2, you're pretty good, 3s, 4s, whatever, and how like 9, you're basically not in society, 8, whatever. I just thought it was so stupid and not developed well at all. She should have just made it a Princess Bachelor story. She shouldn't, I don't think Kira Cass should have even bothered with any sort of dystopian elements, because like it almost took away from the story, just because you know what we're all here for. We're here for this stupid relationship. We're not here to find out how the like society is kind of regressed and that's why we have monarchies again and blah blah. Like if she was gonna commit to the dystopian, she should have committed to it and explained way more. I was expecting there to be a lot more girl hate, but America actually played nice with a lot of the girls, a lot better than I expected. Of course there's gonna be a villainous-y kind of character. However, there was this one passage at the beginning of the book where I needed to mark this down. This is what I expected the book to be. Luckily it wasn't the whole time, but there was one sentence, and this is when like all the girls are being announced to be a part of the selection. It says, "A brunette with smoldering eyes this time. Maybe my age, but she seemed more ... experienced." And stuff like that just makes me roll my eyes. The girl looks more experienced than you. Why? Like how? It just, stuff like that I can't get involved with. But for the most part, the selection wasn't actually that bad. I can imagine the rest of the series is going to be a little bit more annoying, but I found a guilty pleasure series. For the longest time I didn't rate it because I was just so confused on how I should rate it, but I tentatively put it at 3 stars. I did really enjoy myself while reading it, but there was also things that just I couldn't get over. Yeah, I spent way too much time talking about this selection. This is going to be kind of an unpopular opinion. I read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, and I didn't really care about it. It took me about 2 weeks to finish it. It's like kind of big. It's slightly over 500 pages, but it in no way should take me over 2 weeks to read. It is a dual perspective novel set in Nazi-occupied France between a blind French girl and a German boy who is drafted. There were things I liked about it, but because it took me so long to read, all the good things about it have kind of evaporated in my mind. My biggest issue is that there was no plot whatsoever. I am a character-based reader. I love character growth and character arcs, and I don't typically need a very big plot to be satisfied. However, this book was just wandering until the last 100-ish, not even 75 pages for a quick climax and ending, and that was it. I felt like it could have been easily 200 pages shorter and you still would have gotten basically exactly the same book. I think Doerr is a very nice writer, and I'm not entirely opposed to reading something by him in the future. It starts in 1945 and then you get little glimpses of what's going to happen, and then goes to 1940, and then 100 pages later you get 1945 again. And I believe it was an attempt to build suspense, but because there was so much time in between those suspenseful moments, all of it kind of dissipated. I gave All the Light We Cannot See 3 out of 5 stars. Really it should be 2 out of 5 stars, but I'm mildly terrified that someone's gonna like kill me for giving it 2 stars. But who knows, maybe I'll be brave enough to actually change it. My recording cut off and I reviewed both Our Dark Duet and my next book without noticing, so that's great. So to start over, Our Dark Duet is Victoria Schwab, and needless to say, I loved it. I thought she improved upon the first one, and if you didn't already know, Our Dark Duet is the sequel to the This Savage Song duology. I really adored this duology as a whole. I really liked that Schwab expanded the world. We understand how the different cities work and why they seem to be so very isolated from one another. And she also introduces a new cast of characters, which I very much like. I don't want to say anything about the plot, but the direction it went, I did enjoy. It was very fast-paced and quick-moving. So annoyed this cut off because I liked what I said the first time. But like, if you thought this Savage song was dark, trust me, our Dark Duet is 5 times more bleak and dark and gritty, and that's personally how I love my fantasy to be. I love when my characters go through shit, which sounds so sadistic and terrible, but I will say that one of the antagonists in our Dark Duet is similar to one of the antagonists in the Shades of Magic series. It didn't bother me so much because we have multiple antagonists in both. And might I say that the ending really crushed my soul, and I gave our Dark Duet 5 out of 5 stars. I think she knocked it out of the park. The next book I read quickly became a favorite of the year, and it is The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This book follows our main character Molly, who is 17 and has had like 26 crushes, but never gone any step further because she's terrified of rejection. Molly is fat, and there is own voices representation in this book for being plus size and anxiety. This book was the kind of story that I really could have used when I was younger. I have not related to a character so hard in just so many different ways, and I think that's honestly, it's because Becky Albertalli gets it. This book was body positive and feminist and so incredibly inclusive. Molly has 2 moms, and Molly, her twin sister, and their little brother are sperm donor babies. Molly's twin sister is gay, and her love interest is pansexual, and it's just all around inclusive. I liked that Molly wasn't perfect. She sometimes thought some shitty things. She sometimes was not the greatest friend, but it's understandable because Molly is human and humans fuck up. I plan to do a full review for this book, so when I get it up, I will leave a link in the cards and down below for you. And I forgot to say, I gave The Upside of Unrequited 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. The last book I read in August, I read on the very last day because I had to get to it because of my summer TBR little challenge. I read A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess in one day. This book is set in kind of a dystopian future where like there's a ton of crime, and then the police force and the government super corrupt. There's not a super amount of like world building, so I'm still kind of unclear as to when and where it is actually set, but it follows our main character Alex, who's 15 years old, and he is the worst human being. He's a rapist and a murderer and all around like shithead. He goes around his town creating chaos because he likes to do it. He feels joy when he's making other people hurt. And as much as I'm talking about how bad of a person he was, I really enjoyed this book. It has a pretty bleak look on humanity's future. Alex ends up getting caught and sent to a government program in which like he is tortured into being good. And there are so many interesting themes that Burgess discusses and brings up with that. Because is it better for you to be a bad person with your own free will or forced into being a good person? And it was just super interesting. This book was difficult to read, not only because of the subject matter, but this book has a combination of English and Russian slang, and there's no like dictionary or explanation, so you're basically thrown into the writing and world, and it's like, you know what, figure it out. Figure out what he's saying, and it can be difficult to glean the meaning sometimes. I was not a fan of the ending. I expected Burgess to go one way, and he didn't, and it kind of, I don't know, just surprised me, but not in the good way. I very much enjoyed A Clockwork Orange, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but I'm hesitant to recommend it to everyone just because it's difficult to read both in content and the language. I would put so many trigger warnings on this book. Trigger warnings for rape, murder, depression, suicide, so many things in this book. So if you're a little hesitant to anything like that, I want to warn you in advance. So those are the 9-10 books I read in the past 2 months. I would like to know what one of your favorite reads have been in the past few months, and also if you're interested in picking up any of the books that I have reviewed today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye!